Hello everyone, today we are looking at Control. Wow, this game really caught me off guard. It was a really amazingly fun game, and I didn't even realize it was by Remedy, by the studio made Alan Wake. I think, studios, when they kind of have a big sequel to one of their older hit games like Double Fine and Psychonauts and Alan Wake 2 and Remedy, that's when they finally break into the mass consciousness and say, oh, okay, I know what I'm getting into. But Control, again, I didn't know it was by them, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I just know it won kind of a few awards back there, and I kind of knew what the character looked like, but I knew nothing about it. And it was on Xbox Game Pass, so I'm like, all right, sure, I'll give this a shot. And just wow. I've played Alan Wake. I really didn't care for it. It's kind of cool. It's kind of interesting. Whatever, this concept of light versus dark and shooting guys. From a gameplay perspective, it was actually pretty advanced. Back then, it was very smooth for its gameplay, and for like a horror game that was like Silent Hill, but like actiony. And so I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of nifty, but really not my thing. This game, however, it was like, oh, wow, this is actually very cool. And so the premise of Control is really, really interesting in the fact that it is also very vague, extremely vague, actually. And it kind of puts the player in this position where you're not really sure who to trust. And the whole narrative of Control is also, again, very interesting. And so similar to Alan Wake, they really harp on this whole theme of Stephen King and the fact that these inanimate objects can come to life and fly at you. That's kind of like one of the big things they really enjoy. And so, of course, telekinesis is one of the first powers you get. And so what is the story of Control? Well, you play as Jesse, who is the director of the board. And you're not exactly sure what the board is, but it belongs to this ministry or department of the US government. And so essentially it's this government building somewhere in some city. And Jessie shows up there and she says she's there to basically find her brother, who she believes has been kidnapped. But upon coming into the building, she is treated as the new director of the bureau. And so you have this whole thing where you don't know, like, if Jessie is lying to you, if the other characters are lying to her, whose perspective is what. And it's really, really interesting how it messes with you. And so you kind of, normally go about your day, but as you get deeper into the facility, you realize there's a bunch of supernatural stuff going on. And so it starts off kind of normally in the sense that, oh, okay, it's, a bunch of guys who are possessed and kind of zombie-like, and you have to shoot them, and it's like, okay, whatever. And then you find out they're being controlled by this thing called the Hiss. And then you have these cutscenes where you have this inverted black pyramid that is descending down and speaking absolute gibberish or in like weird code or like corporate speak. And you have to interpret what they're saying. And what I realized actually is there's also a voice and audio, but it's all garbled and it's saying the same kind of message, but paraphrasing it. And so it makes it this very weird storytelling device. I love this game. It's actually very, very cool. Again, another thing I like about it is it's very obtuse with how it tells its story. And so you kind of just are set on this mission where you're like, okay, I guess I'm the director now and I gotta stop the Hiss. And you kind of shrug and say, all right, whatever, I'll be this person. And so as you go throughout the facility, you find different stages of corruption of the Hiss and of these things called objects of power. And so it's very similar to I guess the X-Files or something, where essentially you find these normal, ordinary objects, but they've been, injected or controlled by some supernatural power, which allows them to give some weird, like, energy or power, essentially. So it's very definitely sci-fi, but a mixture of kind of, bureaucracy and government and, other things like that. And so as you explore the bureau, you also get new powers by subduing these supernatural elements within. So the first ability, like I said, you get is telekinesis, and it's this floppy disk that's causing it, and you're able to interface with it and essentially calm it down. And this becomes one of your main attacks, honestly, throughout most of the game, that you just pick up pieces of concrete out of the environment or objects like benches or whatever and hurl it at enemies for, honestly, a lot more damage. The other powers you get are a dash ability, a float and fly ability. And once you get that, the game really opens up. Once you can actually fly and kind of float through the environment, it feels really, really cool. And also, shooting your gun while flying also feels really nice. I guess on combat in general, you also have the ability to do a melee attack, which is kind of like a force wave thing. You also have a standard gun, which you basically can develop into and transform into different types of guns. Really, it's a weird thing. It's like this, they treat it like a holy relic almost. And it's essentially just, again, a handgun. But as you find other versions of it, it'll essentially transform. So it's still the same device, but in order to get different weapons, it just, you need to find them and pick them up, and it just transforms into those forms. So it becomes, a shotgun, a sniper, a submachine gun, and a grenade launcher, which is definitely my favorite. And so, yeah, it's kind of like, it's really weird how they do it, where you basically do have infinite ammo, but it's just based on a cooldown thing. So if you use up all your ammo, you kind of have to switch your telekinesis powers and kind of wait for it to basically recharge. So there is no like reloading or anything. But there are a lot of pickups and options in this game to level up and change the damage output and other things of your weapon. For example, you might find certain pickups in these weird containers that are like these vacuum sealed units throughout the facility that essentially act as these items that will do certain things for your weapon. So you have 2 slots per weapon, and so you can choose, weapon specific things. Like there's one for the shotgun that like decreases choke, or increases zoom on the sniper. And then there are other generic things that are like, increase rate of fire, increase damage output, increase accuracy, increase reload and recharge speed, increase melee damage while this is equipped, and a bunch of other stuff. And they added quite a few special ones in the DLC. You also come across a series of very eccentric characters throughout your journey, all of them who work for the Bureau and apparently report to you. And so you kind of, you're kind of like, oh, okay, sure, you work for me, sure, whatever. And so you have Emily Pope, who is kind of your main contact and stays in the main hub world. And so this entire, game is kind of like a hub world, really. You just kind of go through the facility in a semi-non-linear fashion. There's definitely a way to go through it, but this is really an action-adventure game, so you're not really spending time going in any kind of open world or anything. Again, you're just really curious to see what kind of enemy is next, what kind of weird, telekinesis or psychic power thing is waiting for you around the corner. There's lots of enemies who essentially are, they can fly around. There's wheelchair enemies that are also super strong. Enemies also display their health bar above their head, so it's very easy to tell, how much health they have left and how long it takes to kill them. And yeah, there's different strategies for different enemies. If you're using the pistol, you kind of want to pull off headshots, submachine gun for larger guys. And honestly, the grenade launcher is like an all-rounder. You can use it for almost anyone, and I absolutely love it. Some enemies will also have shields that will recharge, so you kind of have to use telekinesis to take out their shields, and then usually shoot them with some kind of weapon is the kind of typical strategy with that. Also, flying enemies are very annoying because they're very hard to hit, and they tend to hit you from different directions as well. Also, you have a certain amount of points that when you die, you lose 10% or something. And so these points are used through upgrading your character, essentially. And so you usually are dropped once enemies are hit and defeated. You can also, of course, take cover in this game and kind of a cover-based shooter. But again, you also have this flying ability, which is really great to use and really encourages you to be more sort of aerial and not really restricted to just another cover-based shooter, which I really enjoy. Again, for the upgrades for ammo recharge and choke and scope and damage output. There are also different levels to each one, and so you can range from level 1 to level 5 or 6 in the DLC. And so each one of these, unfortunately, you do have an inventory capacity for the things you can hold. So a lot of the time, you'll find yourself taking the lower numbered, weapon mods essentially, and you can recycle them into points, which is useful at least. Again, there's lots of cool audio logs and reading logs about what exactly the Bureau does. They kind of investigate these supernatural elements and how they kind of fit into these weird, normalized circumstances. I think a perfect example of this is throughout the game, you'll come to a common puzzle called the Ocean Gate Hotel or something. And so this is kind of a motel rather, where you kind of have to go through it, hit, the bell a certain amount of times, go in certain rooms, solve puzzles, but you always go back to this Ocean Gate Motel based in California, and they're like, we don't know why this is here, but it just is. And you just have to do a bunch of random little ceremonies and rituals like an OCD person, and you have no idea why, but it just activates this thing for some reason, and you just have to go with it. And you're like, okay, all right, whatever. Again, there are other objects of power like the hotline, which is just a telephone. But that object is, it allows you to speak to the board or this higher power. And again, the good and bad thing about this game, it's very much like a Stephen King novel where you have absolutely no idea what's going on. And it really is weird and crazy, and you just kind of have to go along for the ride, essentially. So some of the puzzles might be things like, there's a crooked painting, you have to make it upright. There's a TV you have to turn off, and then suddenly you'll get a piece of weird dialogue. There's also quite a few logs by Dr. Darling, who basically is the lead researcher at the Bureau, and he's the one kind of explaining to you, the player, why all this weird stuff is happening and what the possible reasons for it could be. But really, you're just kind of sent into this world where you just have no idea where you are and what you're doing, and you just gotta deal with it, basically. Probably my favorite level in this game is the Panopticon. It's this giant rotating room with different objects of powers that have been isolated and all the stories about them. There are some objects of powers that, they some camera stand or mannequin stand where, they can't be left alone and they have to be stared at for a prolonged moment of time, and someone ends up falling asleep and ends up being turned inside out or something. So it kind of has that SCP kind of energy to the game, which is really nifty and really cool. And again, it's the mystery and the mundane and the mythical all come together and mix into this one wild and weird story, which I absolutely love. So the good and bad part about this game is the ending. So you eventually do find Dylan and you find, the other characters. But the one big issue and problem that at least I had with this game is that when it ends, it's very open-ended and very kind of head-scratching and does not really, concretely create a satisfying ending. But the setup is so good. I ended up writing a bunch of possible theories for endings for what exactly was going on. Who is Polaris? Why was Jessie called there in the first place? Maybe she was tricked by Dylan. Some of my ideas revolve around the idea that Polaris is actually an evil entity and actually called her there, and you are actually there posing as the director, or you are, a different kind of entity that is an extension of Polaris. The idea that Director Trench is actually, killed himself on purpose, and a bunch of other stuff like this. Again, what I like about this game is it deals with supernatural events and content, but makes them in a very believable manner. Is this kind of thing that eats a bunch of matter, or a certain, doll that just, looks at people and, that's all it ever does. So typical horror stuff, but not done in a very extreme manner. Again, it's kind of quirky and kind of goofy, but it keeps its tone of seriousness throughout. So again, I like these games where the quirkiness is left as the minimal aspect and not the maximum aspect. Also, there's other cool, quirky things, or just not quirky, but like really nice tropes in this game. For example, there's this one side quest that's totally optional where you have to fight evil Jesse in the mirror dimension, and I just love stupid stuff like that. And again, it doesn't harp on itself; it doesn't impose on itself. It's just like, yeah, okay, here's this thing, like, you know, it's a cool whatever, and you just get to experience it. And what's really great, I really actually encourage everyone to go do the Jesse fight. The Mirror Jesse fight, because you get in the Mirror Realm a special costume, and honestly, it is the only good costume in the entire game. I mean, Jesse's default leather jacket is fine, it's all right, it's whatever, but there are a lot of other costumes in the game that kind of suck. There's like a business wear costume, a golden suit costume, a paper pusher costume. They all suck, but the one you get for doing the Mirror Jesse fight is this weird occult, like cult leader Buddha kind of thing, and it looks really good when you're floating in the air and you have these trailing coattails coming off the design. It's really, really nifty, and I really enjoyed it. It looked really cool. The other thing I do also have to say about Jessie in general as a character design is that her jaw is just massive. Like, I just call her Jessie Chin because it's so over exaggerated. I don't know why they had to do that, especially when you decide to look up the picture of what her model looks like, i.e. who they, you know, made her based on visually. She does not have this massive jaw, and I just don't know why they decided to go with it. I still love Jessie as a character, but like, they just did this ridiculous thing. I mean, it'd be no different than giving her massive breasts or massive feet or something, or a massive jaw, and be like, yes, I'm the Gugu Chad, director of the Bureau. Yeah. There's also a lot of backtracking in this game. You can find certain special rooms. There's this one room that's just filled with all post-it notes. Another room that is like calculating the luck and probability of certain objects and items. So it goes from everything from, horseshoes to Lucky Charms, talismans and whatever. And you'd have to like roll a perfect dice roll on like the roulette wheel or something. And it's trying to like numerically calculate and quantify the qualitative event and sense of the luck in the room. So just really funny, crazy things like that. I really love the writing in this game because it kind of skips all the small talk. Who are you? Who is this? What's going on? And maybe to its own detriment, it doesn't explain what's going on. You kind of piece it together yourself. But it kind of stays focused on the characterization and just the typical kind of dialogue. You'd like, all the characters have just kind of accepted and moved on that this his thing is happening and that these weird technological inventions exist, and they're just moving on to like the normal day. And I really do kind of appreciate that. Of course, I would be remiss not to mention in this story one of the climaxes at the very end, when you finally get the Walkman from the janitor and you play this song and you have the infinite hallway level, and it turns into this awesome level where you have this rock song playing and you get this cool sequence where, again, it's all been ambience and normal combat music, but now you get this rock song called Take Control, and you go through this giant corridor just gunning down guys, and it's like the penultimate level before the end of the game, and it's so cool. It's honestly so fun because you get to use all of your powers and all of your things and all of your skills at the end of the game and kind of show what you're made of. And it's this cool almost montage moment. I absolutely love that segment. And they had it in Alan Wake as well during the rock concert, but it just didn't feel as big and as epic. It was like a cool thing. But from a gameplay perspective, you want to kind of, once you've got the handle on all your abilities and whatever, you kind of want to show off before you finish the game. And it is the perfect moment to do it. And I love that segment of the game. It blew me away. Yeah, so there's a lot of things about this game that are very fun, very cool, and honestly, I have a lot to say about it, way more than I thought I would. Also, the effects on the guys when they're destroyed, they have this weird like gasoline effect. It's just it looks really cool. And once you get the hang of combat, you kind of understand what works and what doesn't, and it's just a lot of fun, honestly. Probably the worst and best enemy I encounter are the exploding crawling guys. They're a lot of fun. It's also very fun. You get this one power where you can possess enemies, and that's a lot of fun. I definitely use one of the mods on Jesse that increases the possession speed so that you're able to essentially take them out and possess them faster. And if you possess one of those exploding guys, he'll just take out a whole bunch of dudes. It feels really, really great to do that. Again, this is definitely one of the best written games. I can see why it got some kind of narrative award. And I forgot, one of the main aspects and mechanics of this game is the control points. So as you're going through the game, the Hiss basically, has infected part of the Bureau, and so you have to find these areas with a bunch of satellites or like listening devices around them. And you basically slam the ground and you basically take control of this area, and it becomes another fast travel point and also a point for you to basically do a bunch of side quests for the people in that area. I also played the DLC for this game recently because I thought it would kind of fix the ending or expand on it more, but oh no, it just gave me more questions than answers. For example, one of the pieces is that you go into the very bottom of the foundation of the oldest house, which is where the Bureau is, and you find this giant nail thing, and the nail has been shattered, and you have to basically restore it and all this other, typical stuff. So that just feels like an extra level that was tacked onto the base game. That could have definitely been in the base game, more or less. Nothing really exciting there. What's way more interesting is the second DLC, which deals with Alan Wake, and so you have this really cool crossover DLC where suddenly Alan Wake is part of the Control universe, and they kind of mix those two IPs together, and that got me really excited for Alan Wake 2, which I still haven't played yet, but I thought that was super, super cool. And honestly, that DLC did make me go back and finish the original Alan Wake and also the DLCs for Alan Wake, which I never got around to in the first place. So yeah, I don't know. I'm really kind of a Remedy fan now, I guess. They just match the balance between not being too quirky and also being very tasteful and interesting with their very strange, dynamic sci-fi world. It's a combination of mystery and characterization that is perfectly balanced, and I absolutely love it. Anyway, it's very weird because going into this game, I had seen it at award shows, but I couldn't grasp what it was about. Like, what's the vibe? What's the theme? Like, what are you even doing? And after playing the game, I can still tell you, I still have no idea what you're doing, but I still have an appreciation for the vibe. Also in the DLC, they had this horde mode kind of involved, and I didn't really enjoy that. It's kind of like a tacked on cheap thing. I'm like, oh, this isn't very fun. This is just killing a bunch of guys that are also very, very difficult. And again, just the writing in this game, it's not something like anything I've ever experienced. It kind of has that, bureaucratic corporate language, but about weird sci-fi extraterrestrial or extra supernatural stuff going on. Really, really neat. I love it. The map itself is a little bit confusing at times, but that's just a nitpick thing, I guess. Also, what's very interesting, what they did for this game, it has a rotating amount of like weekly or daily quests. And so I kind of find that's a funny thing that you'd usually see in a multiplayer game, but in here it kind of works. So it'll be a thing like, go kill 5 Reapers or something in the maintenance district, and then you can turn that in for points and stuff. And so it kind of has this longevity, long-term effect to the game. And so, again, I just love going into a new area, finding out, the lay of the land, the kinds of enemies in there, unlocking all the locked stuff, getting all of the locked, boxes and all the, possible weapon mods and stuff. Sometimes you open these locked boxes and they're just absolute trash inside and not good stuff at all. But sometimes you get a really cool weapon mod that really gives you a big boost. But yeah, I'm honestly very passionate about this game, surprisingly to even myself. I definitely enjoyed it, but it really just kind of blew my mind how deep it went and how nuanced the gameplay was and how all these different scenarios occurred. Control's actually a really good game, despite what you might see when you think it, but despite what you might think when you see it. But yeah, it's a great game. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much just what I want to leave you with, and I'll see you later. Bye.